All right, everyone. We have another one of our animator interviews today. Today we are talking with Mr. Patrick Burr. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm good.
Mm.
Um, you know, can you kind of if you wanted to summarize your kind of work, what would you call yourself as an animator or your what you've done?
Yeah, I would say that I'm mostly an experimental animator because it's the thing I identify with, but
Okay.
I have done a lot of commercial work and
Hmm.
yeah, also deliberately chose to do more like this corporate kind of animation to have more time to do my
Sure.
independent work. But yeah, I would say I mostly identify with being more an experimental animator. Yeah.
Any kind of your commercial work, any work that would have been in America that my students might have seen or
No,
no?
not
Okay.
really, because the thing what I meant by corporate is that it's more advertisement in the sense of maybe pharma companies, but also
Like
conservative
presentations
museums.
they would do at like conventions type of stuff or
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's a lot of the internal kind of advertisement they do,
Mhm.
which is actually a good job to have.
Sure, yeah.
Many
There's
people
always
don't
money in
know because
that.
yeah, when you do film work or TV shows, you get squeezed. You really get
Right, sure, of
squeezed,
course.
and you have to work all the time, and you can basically forget about your own personal projects. But
Sure,
in
sure.
this corporate world, everything is very orderly and well paid, at least until
Sure,
now.
yeah. No, totally.
And so, yeah, it did make sense for me to part-time work in this, let's call it like bullshit advertisement field, which can also be fun, just from like
Sure.
a technical perspective and the things you learn. But then still having enough time and energy to do my experimental short films on the side. Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of talk about, I mean, little known fact is like Disney in the Walt Disney Studio, they were losing money until World War II, and then I mean, it wasn't corporate, it was federal US government, but like they got a lot of money to do those. I don't know if you've ever seen those, like Walt Disney did a bunch of training films for the US
Hmm.
military in
Yeah.
World War II.
Mhm.
So it's like that was actually, I mean, that was actually that's how they've kept from going under, at least at that point, is like, because,
Interesting.
there wasn't as much commercialism at the
Yeah,
time for them to do their stuff.
yeah.
So it's like, so yeah, it's always interesting how all of that kind of plays together. So where does your love of animation or motion come from, do you think?
I would say it started with a love for film. So I think even like live action film,
Hmm.
but and it's still present. I still love live action films and films in
Hmm.
general. And so this passion started with like when I was 10 or so, but I do remember a very decisive moment. So in Germany, there's this TV station which is more known for the art housey cultural kind of stuff called Arte, and
Okay.
they had like a short film program that was shown oftentimes at midnight. And
Okay.
so when I was 15 or so, I stayed up late when my parents were gone, and then this just came on, and I saw like an experimental animated short film, which
Hmm.
in the late 90s it's very unlikely to come across, and
Right, right.
that really like opened my mind where I thought,
The
oh wow,
different
like a
opportunities in
different
animation.
yeah, a different world is possible because making a mainstream film is very unapproachable as like a regular person who's
Sure.
not like a nepo baby or something.
Right,
It
right.
seems completely out of reach. But
Sure.
but but this it was still really engaging, these short films, even though they were low budget and weird. Yeah,
Right.
I think that kind of blew the lid off. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it's especially back then. I mean, I don't know how old you are, but I think you're a little bit probably younger than me. But yeah, it's like in the 90s, it's like you had only so much access based on wherever you lived through TV. I mean, I used to go to the Spike and Mike. I don't know if you ever heard of those, but like in the 90s, early 2000s, there was this film festival called Spike and Mike's Twisted Cartoons or something along those lines. And it was like all these kind of cartoons that like would never get played on TV. You know, they're kind of too weird or too whatever. But it's like, they would kind of collect them and put them together as like a kind of, and they play it like an art house type, and like that was like, you would see that and be like, oh, okay, you can do these kind of, I mean, because of course you're going to get influenced by what you see growing up. So if you only see, Disney or whatever equivalent,
Yeah,
you're going to go, oh, that's what animation is. It's a Disney movie, it's a Pixar movie. But then
yeah,
you can see these other forms that maybe touch topics that don't normally get talked about in mainstream movies, or maybe
mm,
they're done in a, like their storytelling is different, where it's not A to B storyline. It can be different, where it's like it doesn't have to be a character per se, or at least not
yeah.
in the traditional sense of like boy meets girl type of storyline kind of situation. And yeah, and that's always very, it's very interesting to see stuff like that.
Yeah, and when these really weird, like idiosyncratic, low budget things really connect to people, it connects hard, I would say.
Sure.
It really goes hard. And it's I would say it's at least as profound as some, like Disney experiences you had. It's great to see mainstream films and then being able to
Hmm.
talk to many people about that. But when you
Hmm.
have these small things, also like festivals, and it really connects, so that's like on a very human level something extremely special. So I
Right.
never thought that or I learned over time that this independent world, like this really experiment, is not like a lesser version of the mainstream thing, right? It's not
Sure.
like to me, it's equally strong, or can you even be stronger,
Sure.
if this happens. So that's what I really liked. Uh, Also about the short film experimental world, yeah.
Okay, so you're seeing these kind of experimental short films. So where do you go from there? Do you go to art school or do you just start doing your own
Um,
work? Or how's it go?
yeah, yeah. So when I was 18, 19, I didn't feel ready for. I wanted to go to film school,
Okay.
but I didn't feel ready. And in retrospect, I think I was right about not feeling ready. And so I first studied philosophy, which
Okay.
was kind of a detour. I didn't graduate, but so I went to Berlin to study philosophy. But then, with 24, I felt kind of ready and went to art school in Cologne, which, by the
Okay.
way, it's not that unusual, like this path, because colleges in Germany are free.
Right.
So in the States, it's more like, okay, you go to college when you're 19, or basically, yeah.
It's
But
also a
in
cultural
Germany, it's not
thing.
unusual to go,
Yeah, it's a
outside.
cultural thing too.
Yeah.
I'm in the time period I grew up, and also it depends on location and social economic status and that kind of stuff. In my high school, if you had said, I'm not going to go to college, you might as well have said, I'm going to become a drug addict because they would be
Mm,
like, that's a silly thing to do. Why would you not go to
mm,
college? And then I ended up studying in New Zealand for a while, and I had these like Swedish roommates, and I was like what would be considered a junior, or I've been in college 3 years, and they were like the same age as me. They were like 20, 21. And they were sort of what we would call a freshman. They were like first year. And I was like, why didn't you guys go to college? And they're like, oh, people were rare, they don't necessarily do that. They, get a job or they travel. And I was
mm,
like, you know what? I never, because it didn't occur to me not to go to college. Like, it's just like what you did. You didn't question, you go to high school, you graduate, you go to, try to get in a good college. And that's what life was. But like I never thought about like, if I had sort of thought about it that way and looked at my life differently, maybe I would have like gotten a job or first, or at least try to get out of my own sort of,
yeah.
small bubble of the world I lived in. And I think I would have taken college a
Yeah,
little
it,
differently,
it does make sense. Some film schools in Germany even require you to have like 3 years of experience in in the
Hmm.
field, work, or being an intern at least, or something like that, which completely makes sense because, yeah. And also, what I realized, when you have your counselor or whatever, or your job advisor in high school, they in the States, they apparently they don't mention even the possibility of studying abroad, which I find
Okay.
interesting. It's always about, okay, what American college do you want to go to?
Sure,
which I find interesting because you would save so much tuition money by just studying abroad. But I mean, that's a
sure. So you go to the German film school in Cologne, right? And then how does
German
that get
art.
in? Is there German
Yeah.
art? Okay. And that gets you, do you start doing your animations there or?
Until that point, because I'm half nerd, so I was
Uh-huh.
always into this very also technology kind of stuff, and but
Uh-huh.
I tried in the beginning at least to get away from that because I wanted to do back then live action directing.
Okay.
So in the beginning, I did like directing classes and stuff like that, and then I slipped into performance for a while because we had
Okay.
like a really great professor joining school. But then
Mhm.
I realized, stick to what you do best in a way, and then I returned to animation. But
Okay.
um, but the thing is, I think the lesson I drew from that and all these kind of detours, that the detours are super valuable when you're not only doing one thing and gaining perspective from like other fields. I mean, they are adjacent, right? So like
Mhm.
live action direct and performance also and stuff like that. Um, but still, yeah. Then I returned to anime. I made my first like official short film, which was relatively successful in the
Mhm.
short film world. And I think
So if
the
you mind,
success of
let me put a pin in that for a second. So for my students who, when you spent your time, you made this, animation. How did you, at that point, I don't know what year this is, how did you distribute it or how did you get people to see it?
Okay, so it was 2013 when I made
Okay.
the film, and uh, and distribution was just in the sense of submitting to festivals.
Film festivals. Okay.
Yeah, and then from festivals, got picked up here and there, and yeah, but I mean, you can't really make a lot of money with experimental
Sure.
short films. It sometimes happens, but it rarely does. And so it was the best thing about that was really uh, the ability to travel to all these places
Okay.
and
Where the film festivals
and
were, you
meet.
mean?
Hmm?
Where the film festivals were, you mean?
Yeah, to the film festivals, especially in Europe, you get subsidies for everything, so it was
Right.
almost free traveling
Oh,
and
that's nice.
meeting all these interesting people. And I mean, if you want to do anything, especially in this business, I truly believe that a lot is just connections and the people because many of the jobs just I know this guy, and then
Yeah,
uh,
I mean, for my students, hopefully you've seen other interviews I've done, and it's whether it's independent or even, my friend Arnie would say like, he was an animator in Hollywood in the 80s, and it's like, all of his jobs were because, he could do the work and he was friendly with people and be like, oh
yeah,
yeah, Arnie can work on this project or,
yeah, yeah,
So it
yeah,
is, yeah. I mean, a lot of it is like, getting to know people. People know that you're a good
yeah.
person and can do the
And of
work,
course, you
whatever. They
do
like
need
your
the
work.
skills,
Yeah,
obviously.
of course. It's skill plus,
Yeah, plus
um,
connect. It just
plus connections,
also,
plus, just talking with people and such.
yeah, and also, I think really important just to being easy to work with.
Right,
I
yes.
think I think if I when I hire people like for a it's like okay, even the person who's a little less skilled but easier to work with,
Right.
gets like preferential treatment because you will
Sure.
spend so much time with these people, and
Yeah, yeah. No,
mm,
I was talking with a guy yesterday who's a former Cartoon Network guy, and he was like, "Yeah, I mean, we were talking more about how to deal with clients because he's more from sort of the
mm,
direct corporate world." He's like, but like, he's like, it's such a small world that you don't want to be known as you just want to be known as easy to work with
yeah,
because it's like, if you start getting a reputation as being difficult, it's going to be harder for you unless you're very
yeah, for
talented.
sure, yeah.
So, you work, you start working, you start submitting to festivals. I have a question for you. So a lot of, as I've sort of talked with my students and we've done work, it's like, usually a normal animation is like, okay, there's a story, you have a script, you storyboard it. Sometimes with independent or experimental, there's less. I would say there's more, not always a story, but a theme. You know what I mean? So, how do you plan out an idea of yours? Like, how does that come about for you?
Yeah, so I think it varies a little from film to film, but so for this first film, for example, which was relatively successful, um, I did just a lot of random drawings and then
Mhm.
just um, thinking by doing in a way, and
Okay.
then seeing things in these drawings, and then but also writing, just writing down your thoughts, just like
Mhm.
on a regular basis, and then
Sure.
correlating it with what you do, because obviously you're making something audiovisual that it's not.
Right.
You don't necessarily just want an illustrated story, so it's kind of I would say um, but I think no matter what the approach is, it really with most successful people it comes down to just like a regular practice.
Okay.
I would say so. So like anything. So when you just write like a good, many people know this advice. You have like fixed times each day, like from 10 to
Sure.
12. I'm gonna
Right.
write no matter what. I
Sure.
think this stuff really helps, and then it emerges. And I think before I do, I'm not a big storyboard guy,
Sure.
but I'm a big animation test guy. So I
Okay.
test animation as early as possible, and
Okay.
also with sound. Anybody who wants to do animation, I can really recommend doing your own sound, at least to a certain point where you
Okay.
can hand it over or something. But seeing what you have done in context of sound is really, so that's what I really do very early on, and then
Okay.
I make really rough animatics.
Hmm.
So I think I try to, especially now, have the completed film as like a really ugly rough animatic, but with the
Right.
sound.
Sure.
And if it kind of works, then it also puts you at ease. You have like an ending, you have like a
Sure.
overall arch. But so I don't do storyboarding, I don't do screenplays usually,
Sure.
but I do animatics as quickly as possible. Yeah.
Okay. And you feel like those animatics help you sort of spell out your ideas or visualize
Yeah.
your ideas? Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Because when you want to make something that's also interesting in like an audiovisual or maybe rhythmic sound kind of sense, you really need to. Uh, you can't just think it has to come through a process. I believe
Sure.
because yeah. I think many artists also said before that, oh, if I knew what I was gonna do, I wouldn't have to do it, right? Because
Right. Sure.
you surprise
It's
yourself in
it's
the
it's it's a
process.
discovery process.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And it's this feedback loop of you see something, and then also trying to be honest with yourself. That
Right. Right.
because when you work on something and you spend all this time doing it, you're oftentimes blind to what you actually have done, and just trying to figure out also your own psychology. And yeah, and cultivating a gut feeling. I think that's the most essential thing when it comes to independent animation, because when you're not working for your gut in a way, I would say it's not even worth it. I mean, why
Mhm.
do like weird experimental low paid stuff
Right.
if
Yeah.
you're
Sure.
not
It's a
if you're
passion
not
project. It's a
yeah
yeah.
yeah
No, I do this all
and
the time. Like I do things. This isn't so much in animation, but more like this is like where interaction design, where it's like I wonder if I could do this, and then I'll just try to program it. Just not because of like I'm trying to sell it or whatever. It's just like I want to see if I could do it as like a personal thing. And
yeah
and if I get it, I'm like, yay! I did that thing that I had an idea. And it's like, it's for self-satisfaction as opposed to like, you're not gonna make money per se off of it, but it's like
yeah
the joy of seeing your idea come to life is the payoff, for a lot of independent animators, independent filmmakers, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
I mean, especially in the beginning, just to have this process that leads
Right.
somewhere. But the ideal thing, maybe not ideal because every person is different, but through my lens, is that okay, in the beginning it's exciting to make films, and but sooner or later you think about okay, what's actually really important in my life, like in general, you
Sure.
know. And if you can connect to something that's very specific and related to what's really existentially important to you and manage to put this into a film, I think will also resonate with a good amount of
Mhm.
people. Yeah,
Sure. So for my students, can you kind of since you've kind of done both, right? You do your own stuff where you're the
yeah,
boss and you handle everything, but you've also done
yeah,
corporate stuff where,
yeah,
you are the worker to whatever their
yeah,
idea is. Of course, you have your input, but of course, we all know that clients get
yeah,
the final say, regardless of whether it's a corporation or a government or whatever, who's ever giving you the money. So, like, can you talk about kind of just the differences and pros and
yeah.
cons of
Um,
both?
yeah, for sure. So first I would say I worked for this company 12 years. So now
Hmm.
I'm, right now full time in the at RISD at the academic
Hmm.
world, but before, and it was really super beneficial because just also in terms of life experience and seeing what's out there, because
Sure.
I was lucky enough to work very closely with the boss. So I
Hmm.
went to all the client meetings, and my boss back then was really good at dealing with clients.
Okay.
And the one thing you mentioned before, it's like the many lessons I learned because also in terms of psychology, it's really interesting that, uh, for example, saying no to the client is a
Right.
really powerful tool because
Mhm.
so often you have these non-artists that are deciders, in this world
Right.
usually, and then they come with ideas that are usually really bad. And my boss would sometimes say something like, "No, if you want that, go somewhere else."
Right.
But
Right.
the thing is, he did, and it's not like general advice. Be careful if you want to do that. But he did it in a way that was convincing, where
Right. Yeah.
where they had more trust after, and they said, "Oh, okay, okay."
Right.
So in that sense, and because he was a good businessman, I just all the things I learned about business, about the free
Mhm.
economy and stuff like that. I
Right.
think that people who only spend time in the experimental or in the art academic world, they don't even have this connection to this free economy kind of thing,
Right.
which I find, really, it was time for me to move on
Sure.
after all
Sure.
this time. But I don't regret doing that because it was just so interesting. And when actual, money and institutions are involved, it gets really interesting. And you can, kind of get your way in many ways. A
Yeah.
person I worked for before, he was like a yes man,
Sure.
anything the client wants. And I had no reference frame, so I thought that's the way it's done. But through the other boss, who was really good, I learned, there are different ways to kind of tame the client. And
It's a very political. Maybe not political is not the right word, but yeah, as someone who's dealt with clients, it's like you got to kind of feel them out. And some people are
yeah,
like, "No, this is how we're doing it." You're like, all right, like."
yeah,
And some people are more like, if you can explain your reasoning in a convincing way, it's like, you
yeah,
could do this, but I think if we do this X, Y, Z, it
yeah,
depends on the
and
person. 'Cause every
also,
person's different. Some people are like, it's
yeah,
my way or the highway. We're giving you the money. And some people are willing to, take your advice, especially if you
yeah,
present it in a more
and maybe
palatable
also
way,
something. Yeah, maybe also something good to know if any one of your students ever deals with clients. Um, First of all, maybe just in general, read up about salespeople and how salespeople do. And in
Right.
sales, you have this idea of a yes ladder, which really helped me in dealing
Mhm.
with clients. So you don't have the first meeting, talk about the idea, then go in your basement and do stuff, and then emerge a
Right.
month later. You have this yes ladder. You constantly have meetings, and
Yeah.
and they need to say yes, to every
Yeah,
step.
yeah. No, I would
You
never
know,
do major
and
work until you get the client to approve at least something of it before.
yeah,
And most of the
and
time
not
they
too
won't
late,
let you do, they
not too
won't
late.
go forward with
Yeah.
the money until they get
Yeah.
approval. So it's
No,
like,
yeah,
you know,
because in the beginning, this company did it that way, and then they switched to this agile form where you meet
right.
weekly, and that's way better because
Sure.
then their yeses are all, and they then it's hard for them to say no in the end because you
Right,
got
right.
so many yeses out of them, and they
Sure.
have to keep their integrity and stuff like that. Yeah. So.
Sure, sure. All right. So my students at this point, it's kind of entry level, they've learned animation, 12 principles type stuff, basic timing and things like that. Let's say someone wanted to move forward, but they're not necessarily trying, they just want to animate. They're not necessarily trying to go towards being a studio artist, like a Pixar or a Disney kind of person. What's your advice to them as an animator?
You mean in terms of entry level
Well, no, just like
position?
I mean, like what should they do? Like, like they've gotten bit by the bug, so to speak. So it's like, okay,
Mhm.
they've learned a little bit, but like what would your advice be to them? It doesn't have to
I
necessarily
think,
be job related. It's just like
yeah.
it's just kind of like what would you say to them from an advice point is like the next step you would suggest?
I think I would say, nevertheless, make a personal project
Okay.
because it's just a framework to learn all the stuff. If you
Hmm.
just learn it in like a vacuum, I think it's
Right.
also psychological standard harder. And if you do like anything of your own work, you have something to show, and then be open to criticism, which is easier than it sounds. That's one of
Sure.
my regrets that in my 20s I
I tell
wasn't
my
really.
students this all the time. I tell,
Yeah.
that's what I say because a lot of, I teach a lot of entry level classes, and it's
Mhm.
like you got to get used to being critiqued.
Yeah.
Because
Oh
if
yeah.
you don't, the design world or whatever is not for you. Because trust me, your clients will have no trouble telling you what they
Yeah.
don't like about it, and you have to deal with that if you want to, stay employed or keep them as a client. Because it's
Yeah.
very rare that someone's just going to let you do whatever you want, and they're not going to have notes. So you have to sort of be comfortable, be malleable. Remember that, I mean, unless it's your own personal project, it's like you're part of the team too. It's like it's not just your idea. It's, whoever came, the company had their own idea, they want to see it. So it's like
Mhm.
you're all part of this team, like a soccer team or whatever, and you got to work on this. It's different when it's your own project, but it's like that's what I kind of tell my students a lot of times.
Yeah. And you can also reach out to people, if you know of people who seem
Right.
like more successful. It's oftentimes people are happy when you reach out to them because
Sure.
yeah. And yeah. So do your own projects in a way that also push your technical limits, and then ask people, you respect in a way what they think, even though it is super hard to get good feedback and also to receive good feedback.
Mhm.
Um, but but yeah, or maybe try to create like small groups with your peers where you just show stuff. I mean that's
Sure.
one of the things that unfortunately disappears after the art school world, that people
Mhm.
don't really get
Right.
together and respectfully talk,
Right.
semi-respectfully talk
What their
about the work
thoughts
in
are.
progress.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it's good. I have a friend, he's a painter. He does like a lot of murals, and like a lot of times he will show me his work, and he's a good painter and I respect him. But that doesn't mean, no one's work is perfect. So it's like
Yeah,
I'll look at it and be like, "Oh, this is good, but maybe have you thought about this? Maybe think
yeah,
about this." At the end of the day it's his thing, but it's like I'm just giving my respectful input on it.
yeah,
And not to say my opinion's always right either. I mean, there's a lot, everyone has their own opinions, but it's like yeah, it's good to get feedback from other people. Otherwise you get too siloed. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Yeah, but obviously feedback is also dangerous because, people are not necessarily right, and yeah, and also mistakes can lead to really interesting things. But the premise was someone who wants to work professionally, and it's just you have to work a lot at first, and to do your own projects that would benefit your portfolio. So I would
Mhm.
say, do when you think of an idea, do the smallest possible idea, because the smallest
Okay.
thing is still larger than you think, and it's way better to have something very minimal that looks really good than something
Mhm.
complex that looks mediocre. And I also looked at reels while I was working at this company from people who applied and stuff. And it happens so often that you see personal projects that where they were so big that in the end they had to make compromises, and it
Right.
just doesn't. And just having like one walk cycle in a studio of a cool character can be stronger than like a fight scene that is badly done or something like that.
Sure,
So
sure.
yeah, and maybe then also the strategy of thinking like in modular pieces. So when you think, okay, I really want to make this fight scene between monsters. Okay, what is the smaller idea of that? Okay, the smaller idea is like the monster resting and
Mhm.
after the fight, and you just animate that. And if
Sure.
that works out, you can build on that. Then you have the character. But
Right.
but I see this so often also with RISD students. They take on too much, and then in the
Right.
end they make compromises. It happens
Right.
again and again and again. Taking on to thinking
Right.
I can do it, and then in the end, oh my god, the deadline, and then
Right.
everything falls apart.
Yeah, that happens a lot. I tell my students,
Yeah,
I'd rather you do a simple idea really well than trying
yeah,
to do this
for sure.
complicated thing. And unfortunately, realistically, I know that you want to do that, but it's just the reality is, and they have to learn it the hard way that animation always takes longer
Yeah,
than you think, and you're gonna, there's
yeah,
deadlines, and then I'm like, there's deadlines in real
yeah,
life. You have to learn how to realistically manage, your time and what's possible and what's not possible, or at least not if you're going to
yeah,
work by yourself. So, and I think that's good. But your students hopefully learn that through failing to complete what they wanted to do. But you know what I mean? It's all like
yeah,
learning by doing, which is, I think, the most important thing, learning by doing and learning all the things when you try to do your own project or assignment or whatever. And
yeah.
then what problems you come. I mean, that's what I do even during critique. I say like, what was the biggest problem you had on this project? And
Mm.
like they'll say, I'm like, and sometimes it is like, I didn't have enough time. I'm like, well, maybe next time you should think about that and how can you solve that problem in the future? You make the idea simpler, you give yourself more time somehow, you hire someone if that's a possibility, things like that.
Yeah, and many people also start with procrastination and putting
Yeah, yeah,
things because it's very daunting,
sure.
and well, so one thing I also say sometimes as advice, when you're stuck or you're frozen,
Hmm.
then just deliberately do your make your idea in a bad way. Just say to
Okay.
yourself, "Oh, I'm going to do the bad version of this, and
The
just
quick and dirty
and
version, so to speak. Yeah.
yeah, I'm going to do like a really bad, trashy version of what I want to do. But
Okay.
this usually gets you started because
Yeah, that's a good
usually the
idea.
only thing you have to do is to start, and to
Right.
overcome this. But deliberately saying, okay, I'm going to do it like the trash,
I get what
and
you're saying.
then
Yeah. At
you
least
get
get the
going.
ball rolling so that like the ideas start to flow. Yeah.
Yeah, and also maybe this animatic kind of thing that you
Sure.
have something in front of you where you can mold it, But when you have nothing, you have nothing.
Right. Yeah. Where do you, so this is kind of, I think, the final question we'll go with. Where do you see animation going to? I mean, we've seen it kind of for the last 125 years. Like, where do you see animation kind of going? Um, Either from an artistic standpoint or
Mm.
a business standpoint, whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah, so me personally, I'm making like a little shift into more interactive stuff, but not in sense of
Okay.
games, but that it can just be experienced with the devices in like a more interactive way. So
Hmm.
I think because the technology is getting more accessible and it's more easier to do this, it could go like in this direction also with the virtual reality glasses.
Mm.
We
Right.
still don't know how successful they will be when we have these type of glasses and can see
Sure.
stuff. But I think I do suspect it will become a thing,
Mm.
and then many people will have it, and so just the interaction kind of thing. Also, obviously, AI, the elephant in the room, is
Sure.
like
Right.
just interacting with animation, with natural language and stuff like that. I think will become a thing. And in terms of films, I don't know. I mean, films are in trouble in general, and the form is shifting. Uh, so so yeah, and also with the ability to for also normal people to just generate stuff, it will become interesting. But I
Yeah,
think
it is.
yeah, but I think the people but in the end, art to me is always can be defined as just like a series of decisions, and
Sure.
so there will always be some, let's say, person or entity who is responsible for these decisions, and no matter what the tool is, if it's AI or if it's After Effects, you need this person, and so that's why it comes back to working just a lot, being critiqued, and just becoming a person who's able to make the right or interesting decisions, or it comes down to that. So
Sure.
um, yeah.
All right. Well, we appreciate your time here. If my students want to see any of your work, or do you have like social media or a website or anything you'd like
Yeah,
to tell my
I do
students
have a
about?
website. I do have a website. It's Patrick Buhr, like
Mhm.
Buhr.de, or it's bpatrickb on Instagram.
Okay, great. All right. Well, we appreciate your time. I think we all kind of had learned a little bit, especially if they're not really used to kind of the independent process a little bit. And we
Mhm.
appreciate you speaking with us.
No, thank you for having me.